Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ketty G podcast. And as you all know, the mission of my podcast is for us to really figure out who we are as professionals and how that feeds out as a brand into the world and how we can bring more business organically, really through word of mouth to who we are and what we do. And I do this podcast for two reasons. I really truly care about humanity in the business and the practice of law. And I want us to all see the possibilities for ourselves. And that's why I bring different guests to the scene that inspire me. And my guests know that because sometimes there'll be a long stretch of time when there's no guest. But today I have a guest that's going to inspire you because he inspires me. And I bring this podcast also for the second reason because we all struggle in business and we all have our challenges and we all have an intention and a goal and a plan. And so sharing the viewpoints, different viewpoints and challenges also lets us see possibilities in business. So today I have Jean Vance. Jean is a lawyer, of course, and Jean is a member of Stahl, Keenan, Ogden, PLLC in Lexington, Kentucky. And Jean is also immediate past chair of the House of Delegates at the ABA, and he's also a candidate for president-elect at the ABA. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Connie. It's great to be here with you. Great to be with a good friend.
Oh, thank you. And in fact, that's exactly, most people are like, well, how do you know your guests? Well, a lot of my guests I don't know very well, but as Jean said, I have known Jean now. I was trying to figure this out, Jean. How many years have you and I known each
You
other?
know, it's funny. I was actually thinking about I remember the very first time you and I had an extended conversation. I don't know if you remember this at all, but it was at the ABA mid-year meeting in Miami in 2017. And you and I were both vice chairs. Basically, we were 6 months in to being vice chairs of our respective ABA entities, the litigation section for me and the law practice division for you. And I actually don't remember how we got connected, but I remember that we sat down and had a good long chat at the Marriott Marquis in Miami.
I remember that meeting and I do not remember that conversation. I ain't gonna lie to you, and good on you for remembering. I just remember every interaction with you as being, and I really say this to my audience because I think this belongs in community building and in business. Fun and yet very like respectful, and like we get something out of those interactions. I don't know if that makes sense to the audience, but I think everyone can feel the genuineness of how you and I are interacting. I want to say maybe Melanie Bragg introduced us, or maybe Bob Carlson. I don't know, but whoever it
You know, it,
was.
it might have been Melanie Bragg, but I will tell you that that conversation, the one in Miami, is the one where I first remember you talking about the genesis of the idea of having a national lawyer retreat. And so what we talked about was, well, could the litigation section be a participant in this lawyer retreat that you wanted to develop? And then we carried that conversation on um, through the time when you hosted that lawyer retreat as chair of the law practice division in Colorado in 2018.
Yeah, we worked a lot on that together, and you and the litigation section were instrumental in that, and that's really why I wanted you on because Jean, for me, you're one of those people that rarely says no. You say yes to life, and you show up. And I really, and Gene has boundaries, folks. It's not like he can make time for everything. However, I get inspired by people who can figure out how to say yes to life because they know there's a reason for it and they show up places and they do it well and they're collaborative. And I've always thought that of you. And that ABA lawyer retreat we put on, I didn't put it on by myself. You were really, truly an active participant. As if you guys are listening and you don't know, the ABA litigation section is huge. The one I chaired, law practice, is very small in comparison. However, there was just a lot of camaraderie and support. And So tell us about your background, and I want people to learn from you, like how you say yes to the world and all these things that you do, because you amaze me. That's how why I wanted you on the podcast initially, because it's like Gene always does everything and he does it well and he shows up and you could never tell that you're tired. But I'm assuming you get tired because you're human, right? And I didn't even get into his practice, right? Like he's got a busy practice at the firm, business litigation, correct? And so it's
Business and torts,
business
yes.
and torts, yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, so I grew up in a small town of about 5,000 people in eastern Kentucky in the Appalachian foothills. It was a coal mining region, and my family goes way back in the Appalachian area of the United States, Central Appalachia. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and obviously the first person to go to law school. Um, and I went to a small liberal arts college here in Lexington called Transylvania University. A lot of people ask about that name. It's
Yeah.
because Kentucky actually it was originally called Transylvania, and it was settled under the auspices of the Virginia General Assembly by the Transylvania Company, who employed a guy named Daniel Boone. And if you are a Latin scholar and you know your Latin, you know that Transylvania means in Latin across the woods. And that's where what is now Kentucky was from Virginia. So the long story, I went to Transylvania University here in Lexington. It's the oldest college west of the Allegheny Mountains, 16th oldest in the country.
Wow.
And then to law school, also here in Lexington at the University of Kentucky, and graduated in 1990. And I have been practicing now for over 35 years. I did a 2-year clerkship with a federal judge, but otherwise have been in private practice ever since.
Wow, there's so much there to unpack. First of all, I had no idea that's what Transylvania meant. And the history of that is so interesting. Um, what prompted you to want to go to college? You said you were the first person to go to college and then to law school.
It's a really good story, and it's a story I actually told to the ABA nominating committee when I ran for House of Delegates in chair of the House of Delegates in 2021. So I remember this vividly. I was probably, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old. My father, his entire life, sold cars. Sometimes he worked for other people. Sometimes he had his own business. Mostly he worked for other people, but he sold cars. And it was really cool because we had something different in the driveway every night. And as a kid, I mean, that was really interesting and fun. And so I remember we were coming home from church one Sunday. My parents were in the front seat, my brother and I in the back seat, and I always sat behind my dad. And somehow we got on the subject of what do you want to do when you grow up, kind of thing. And I said, I want to do what you do. I want to sell cars. I think it's really fun, and that's what I want to do. And I can remember him looking in the rearview mirror. He was driving. He was looking in the rearview mirror. He could see me, so he looked me in the eye through the rearview mirror,
Yeah.
and he said, "I don't want you to do that. That's not what I want for you. It's a very hard life, which it is, and I want you to do something else. I want you to go to college. I want you to." Be in a different line of work than what I'm in, whatever interests you, something that interests you, but I don't want you to do what I do. You need a new plan. And
How old
so
were you?
13, maybe something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Um, and so I was kind of interested in politics and history and did a lot of reading. I was kind of a bookish I was a bookish kid, certainly not an athletic kid, which at this age, by the way, is great because my knees are doing really well, unlike the athletes I went to school with who had most of their body parts replaced. But I loved reading about history and politics. There was this series when I was a little kid called Childhood of Famous Americans. And they were these little biographies that were for young readers that were maybe 200 pages or something. And it would be, 19 chapters, I'm sure mostly made up, about what these famous people did as kids, as little kids. And then you get a chapter at the end about what they did the rest of their life. But I was always interested in, politics, history, and so on. I thought, well, maybe I'll go into politics. And what makes the most sense in terms of having a career or a sort of a foundation, I guess, if you're going to go into politics, law school. So I started thinking from the time I was in high school that I would like to be a lawyer and then ultimately go into politics. And I was very fortunate in that the starting with the summer I graduated from high school, I was working in a law office in the summer in my hometown, and it reinforced the idea that I would really like to be a lawyer. And as I got older and went to law school and became a lawyer, the idea of going into politics faded pretty quickly, frankly. And I have really loved being a lawyer my entire career
Why?
because it's fun.
Wow.
You get to help people for one thing, although most of my clients are corporations, right? So it's not like I'm out there helping the little guy necessarily.
Yeah.
But you are helping your clients, and everybody needs to have good legal representation, whether it's a business dispute or I've always done a lot of products liability defense work. Anytime you're defending a product, which is what you're doing in those cases, it's fun to go into court and to take those positions. I love arguing. This was one thing my dad said to me. You ask questions and you argue. You'd be a good lawyer. So, uh, but I enjoy the putting together a good case. I enjoy putting together a good deposition. One of my favorite things to do, really, is to take a discovery deposition of the other side's expert witness. Because there are, I think, generally speaking, broadly, two ways to take a deposition like that. Number one, you can kind of try out your cross examination or how you're going to approach that witness if the case
Right.
actually trial. That's not my approach because cases rarely actually go to trial. The other thing you can do is essentially plumb the depths of every single opinion or statement that this expert witness makes. And that's what I like to do. I like to just do a deep dive. And generally speaking, my expert depositions take a while. And I always start by jumping right in to their opinions, to their report. In fact, if you're in an expert deposition with me and you get to and I start asking about the expert's CV, I'm almost done. Most people start right off with, "Oh,
Away.
so I see you went to college here and you did this and that and the other thing." And that's just, I tend to think that's just verbal throat clearing in a deposition. So anyway, this is not a litigation skills podcast, but you
No,
asked.
but you know what's interesting? That's strategy right there, right? Because verbal throat clearing is really what we call in my world rapport building, right? Getting the person comfortable. And I think part of the strategy for anything like that is, do I want them comfortable or do I want them uncomfortable? That's how I look at it. You're the expert there. I was never a litigator, but as a lawyer, but
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point because most expert depositions start with the background and qualifications. And so I think most experts think that's how the deposition is going to start. And what I do is just immediately jump into the meat of what they're going to say.
yeah, and you catch them. It's not that you're trying to catch them off guard, you're trying to catch them real versus
Right.
relaxed. And I think that makes a difference, which goes
Mhm.
to actually everything you said. First of all, you do not know this because I did not know this, but look what we learned. My dad was also in car sales. So we always had a car in the driveway too, which for me was a lot of fun. However, what your dad said to you really, I think, is so inspiring because as parents, I don't have any children. They want the best for us and they want something different for us. So your dad kind of gave you a roadmap and let you figure out what that is. And I think the rest of everything you said from my audience, I want to sum up as Gene's a curious person. Like he followed those threads and those 200 word, what'd you call them? Biographies, autobiographies, I guess not autobiography, is about a curiosity and imagining what you could have in your life. And I find that as we get older, we lose that ability to say, hey, what do I want? So I love the fact that you call the practice of law fun, because I think everything you're saying goes to your curious nature, if I was to sum it up, because you're still saying these depositions are curious and fun. So I always try to tell my clients, when you look at the world through a vantage point of curiosity, you take out the judgment and you allow whatever is there to really come up to the surface. And I love you saying it's fun, because I'm not sure many lawyers share your viewpoint on the practice of law. Uh, I really don't. I don't run across that very often. So thank you for, I mean, it's very sincere. If you're listening and you're wondering, if you don't know Gene as well as some of us know him, it's very sincere, because I don't think you can make that stuff up. So tell me how that curiosity and that fun puts you so far into the depths of the ABA that you're now a candidate for president-elect. And tell us what that really means, because a lot of people are not involved in the ABA. And I think it's a good place for them to learn about what they could be doing at the ABA and why.
See, I think that is where the piece of my uh, planning or thinking, if you will, when I was a young person,
Mm.
that involved politics, that's where that kind of interest went. So, starting when I was in college, I was very interested in becoming involved in organizations and things. And this is joiner,
Wait,
and
what did
so
you
as I
say, a joiner?
a joiner,
Okay.
yes. And so as I went on, I found a lot of pleasure from being involved in student government and in my fraternity and in other clubs and organizations like that. And so when I graduated from law school and was in my first year out of law school, I was in private practice, and my clerkship came in my second, third years. So I was practicing in Ashland, Kentucky, which is in the northeastern part of the state. It's where Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia come together. And I was with a firm that had offices in Louisville, Lexington, and Ashland. And that first year of practice, it was suggested that I might go to the Kentucky Bar Association convention, which was in Louisville that year. And I did, and went to the Young Lawyers Lunch. And I just thought I was going to a lunch. And one of our Lexington partners had been chair of the Young Lawyers section like 2 or 3 years before that. And so he said, you really ought to think about getting involved with this, and let me introduce you to the incoming chair. So he did. And fortunately for me, the incoming chair felt that the bylaws were just a suggestion and not a requirement. And so there were a certain number of at-large positions on the executive committee of the Kentucky Bar Young Lawyers, but he disregarded that and appointed at least twice as many as he was allowed to appoint, and nobody challenged him. So I was one of those people. And I guess in that first year, I showed some promise of an ability to do something or to be a good committee member and a good volunteer, because when the time came around the next year and the chair that year said, I really should follow the bylaws, and lopped off about half of these people, I was one of the people that made the cut. And so that was my first bar involvement, was with the Kentucky Bar Young Lawyers. And I came through that, eventually became chair of the Kentucky Bar Young Lawyers. And that allowed me to start going to some ABA Young Lawyers division meetings where they had leadership training and other things for state and local young lawyer bar leaders around the country. And I went to a couple of meetings, and I didn't think it was going to be something that I would do over the long term. And then I went to the third meeting or something, and uh, met some people that have become lifelong friends.
Mm.
And because of that, they said, we're doing some things in the ABA YLD. Maybe you should do that too. And so that's how I kind of got started in the American Bar Association. But back to your point or your question, bar involvement has kind of been my one of my civic outlets. And I've always enjoyed it because I think it is a great way for us as lawyers, if we're doing bar work as well, or work in the organized bar, to benefit our profession, to help other lawyers serve their clients better, to help improve the profession itself. You know, you were talking about whether lawyers think practicing law is fun. I do. I agree with you. There are a lot of lawyers that don't. But I think that if we can provide better resources through our bar associations, including the ABA, especially the ABA, frankly, because we have the national heft and the ability to sort of corral resources nationwide, then
Yeah.
I think we can help people be better lawyers and like being a lawyer more than maybe they do now.
That's really well said. Throughout your entire story right there, what I heard you say is you said yes. You kept saying yes. And when you say yes and show up curious and want to be of service, I hope my listeners are understanding that then there's more opportunities, more doors open for you because people pick you out of that crowd. I mean, your world is very different now, but I think that's what I hear. And the other thing is, to your point about bar work being your civic outlet to help the profession and help other lawyers, it's also a form of community, right? I found that out about the ABA and bar, and I find lawyers who are more involved in their community, whatever that means, whether it's the ABA, the local bar, or, I was just coaching a client. She's all the way across the pond in London. She said, I've got to get back into some kind of service orientation, right? Because you get so high level, you lose vision and you start to become disenfranchised because you're doing the same thing, right? So this conversation may be about the deposition, like, oh, well, maybe that was a strategy conversation. Like, if you don't stay in community, you don't connect and you don't have conversations with people that'll add little pieces to your world. Does that?
I absolutely agree with that, and I think bar association work or work like that generally is that's how I counsel young lawyers. You've got to build your network if you're going to continue to grow as a lawyer and to continue to grow in the profession. And there are a lot of good ways to build your network. The bar associations or bar work is one of them. Community organizations are another. Um, and I think I've been very fortunate because I have a very supportive law firm. This law firm, and we now trace our roots back almost 130 years at this point. But public service and bar service is kind of in the DNA of this firm. The name of the firm, Richard Stahl, Judge Stahl, who's the first name, he's been deceased for, I guess, almost 80 years at this point, but he was a judge and a member of the University of Kentucky Board of Trustees. And Rod Keenan, the second name, also gone for probably close to 60 years at this point, was a state senator. And Squire Ogden from Louisville was also very deeply involved in the community there. So we have had a lot of people in this firm over the years, the 100 or more years the firm has been, serve in the legislature, be president of the state bar, be president of the bar here in Lexington, president of the bar in Louisville, chair of the State Chamber of Commerce. One of our partners now is chair of the Lexington Chamber of Commerce. We've had members on the board at UK, at U of L, at Transylvania, at other schools here in Kentucky. It's something that we as a firm believe is really important, and we encourage our young lawyers to find a way to be involved in the community or in the bar in some way as a part of their service here. And we allow them to count billable hours for that.
Now that's a very important point you raise because what if, and I know this happens, a listener of mine or many are saying to themselves, what do you say to the ones that are saying, okay, great, Gene, so you're lucky. You work for a place that factors in. What do you say to people that say, I just don't have time because, okay, I'm a mother. I'm a caretaker for somebody was just telling me the other day, very high up in a global firm, her mother has Alzheimer's now. So how's she supposed to manage these high level roles she has in this global law firm and deal with that, right? So what do you say to people that say, well, Gene, you're different, you're lucky, you've landed in places, or you don't have small children. What do you say? How can people fit this stuff in? What inspiration do you have for them?
I don't have any magic words about that. All I can say is, at least here at this firm, we try to support people no matter what their priorities are. If they can be involved in the community and practice law, that's great. If they have family commitments or other things that they have to do, fully supportive of that. I know that it is a challenge. All I can say is what my path was and what my experience has been. But I don't mean to suggest that it's at all easy for others to do what I've done. I think everybody has to kind of find their own balance of, and it's hard. It's really hard when you're a lawyer because you have client demands. I don't care what kind of practice setting you're in, whether it's the government or private practice, or if you're in-house. In every one of those settings, you have a client or clients.
Mhm.
And you have to be cognizant and aware that your first priority when you're a lawyer is to the people that you are serving as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Uh, your first professional priority, certainly.
Mhm.
And balancing that with the rest of your commitments in life is not easy by any means. And there have been books and articles, and I mean, we could fill a
Volume.
super tanker with all of the literature on this. And I'm not going to sit here with you today and tell you I have the answers. All I can do is tell you what has been my experience, and that everyone, I think, has to find their own path that makes them comfortable.
That there is the answer. And I would substitute the word comfortable for, if I may, based on my experience with what makes you have some inner peace. And I know that might sound very woo-woo and out of left field, but truly at the end of the day, what are we as anybody looking for? Money, yes, accolades, respect, promotions, better clients. But at the end of the day, we do all that because we want life to be a little bit of fun. And so maybe we can insert instead of comfortable fun or whatever. It requires you to stop and think about what do you want at the end of the day. So when I work with clients, I'm like, I can't want this goal for you more than you want it for yourself, that you're going to invest the time and energy. And I think that's what you're really saying. Everyone needs to stop and assess, okay, what do I want in my life and how much longer am I going to go on this hamster wheel? Which brings me to my next point of inquiry. You know that I am on a mission in 2026 because all these years I've been working on this topic and it's become come to a head. Senior level leader attrition and how this all plays into this notion of this is not quite quitting. This is not junior associates. This is not staff. This is those senior people, like I was, frankly. It was a high performer, high functioning, just didn't see a future for myself because I was slowly suffering from burnout and just had lost all touch with myself, and the practice of law had lost that vibe and joy for me, whatever fun, whatever word you want to use. I was no longer curious, but I kept performing. And then one day, I call it the 212 effect, right? We start off at 209 degrees, 210, 211, 211, we got hot water, 212, steam, power that locomotive. It's so powerful, I'm out of there. And no one at the firm knows it. And then that costs $1 million on the balance sheet because of oof, everything, including, having to get them replaced and stalled initiatives, client initiatives falling through, everything. And then everyone leaves in threes. You got the first person that leaves, and then two other senior people at that level reevaluate themselves quietly, still performing. No one ever knows until they're gone. Do you think that what you're talking about factors into why people would want to stay at that level? Because people come and go out of law firms and the legal career all the time, but at that level, the cost is so hefty to the firm. And in 2026, the reason I'm on such a mission is because AI is making everything in law firms contract in 2026 and beyond because people are unstable, unclear. And then the state of the global economy, like I was saying, I was in London earlier this year in January, and everything feels a little bit unstable, if not a lot unstable. So people are checking out faster at those senior levels because I think they think, what do I got to lose? I got to live my life before the world blows up. So how do you bring that conversation we just had about you and the fun and the curiosity and the community building and figuring it out somehow wherever you are with this notion of senior lawyer attrition?
I really do think it's challenging, and I think it depends individually on each person as to how they want to um, how they want to deal with it. I think that some folks are probably just going to throw up their hands if they're in a position to do so and either leave the profession or retire or find something else to do. I think there are others that are going to continue to practice and they will figure out a way to adapt. Um, I think law firms need to appreciate the frustrations that people feel with the things that surround them in the practice. And you mentioned AI. I will broaden that beyond just AI because AI is sort of an easy target. But there are other things that are making the practice of law less enjoyable, particularly if you're in larger firms. And one of those that I'm going to mention that I'm not sure is getting really any attention because of the pain points it creates is cybersecurity.
Hmm.
Our systems are becoming far more difficult to use because of all of the protective systems and protective programs and things that are being put on our devices, right? So, whereas I managed my docket in this way and kept my files in this way. Now you're telling me that because we might be cyber attacked, I have to do this. So you're moving my cheese, right? Okay. And it's very, very frustrating. I personally have had these, my managing partner, if he were listening to this, would say, huh, yes, I hear you. Um, I mean, it's as simple as because of things that we put on the computer or on our laptops now, the protections, I can't book an airline ticket. So these are these little frustrations that kind of all add up and say, you know what? I don't want to put up with this headache anymore, or I want to go to some place that's going to make life easier for me rather than a place that makes life difficult for me. And I think that, when you are, if you're in firm leadership and you're rolling out this new thing and you're not giving a consideration, well, how is this new thing going to affect the old dogs? Then there may be more frustration building up. And you see this senior burnout that you've been focused on, which I think is absolutely under noticed in the profession and is something that we've got to look at more fully.
Yeah, and I'm going to speak to everything else you said, but to that last point, every law firm I talk to, they're like, "Oh, I don't think we have that problem," and I'm like, "Okay," and I'm everything's confidential with me. I'm like, but I have to say it. I'm like, "Okay, I just spoke to two of your senior level and the who." I'm like, I'm not going to say. Plus, there's thousands of them, so I'm safe, right? And I'm like, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just saying. And so with one of them, I was like, pull your data. Let me look at your data and I'll help you decipher it. So that this is not a pie in the sky conversation. But to what you just said, the old dogs, I'm not even so sure that it's all old dogs. I get what you meant, but that's the senior level problem, right? Because these little frustrations of, okay, I am now, I don't know, 45, 55, 65, and I can no longer book an airline ticket, and it's making me crazy. What I see though is those little frustrations, and I'll use an example. I have a client who's very, very senior who with these little things constantly says to me, I could be such a good barista somewhere. I could just make coffee all day, and I've been working on my coffee making skills. And then the rest of his vision, I mean, he's fully figured this out just because that's how he sleeps at night. And if you guys can't see this, my listeners, but Gina's nodding and laughing. He says, and I've got a little bookshop attached to the coffee shop in a small town, and my wife and the kids come and go. And this is what keeps him going. And so my job is to really like have him want to be where he's at and still keep that vision, but not imminent, right? Because that's going to hurt so many things in his life that he just can't wrap his brain around because the pain of the frustrations that you're talking about are so real. And I'm the only one he has to talk to because who else would listen to him. Therapists are one thing, but we put action items into plans. So what were you going to say to all that, Gene? Because I could tell.
Well, no, I mean, it's going to say, I mean, as one of our football coaches here at the University of Kentucky was fond of saying, there's no crying from the yacht. And so in some respects, this is kind of a first world problem, right? So we are lawyers. We are part of the class that has all these benefits, and people think that we have all these benefits, and we do. We absolutely do. Uh, but it does somewhat pale, I suppose, in comparison to someone who is working or struggling to put food on the table every day. But that doesn't make it any less of a problem for us in terms of our personal ability to deal with things on a day-to-day basis. And I do think, I mean, I've always been fortunate that I am not by nature a worrier. And so if I am not by nature a worrier, I do think that reduces my stress level in what is a stressful occupation. And I recognize that there are a lot of people in this occupation who are not that fortunate because they are worriers and they do stress more about it. But I think you really need to find some sort of an outlet um, to get yourself away and to just relax that lawyer muscle a little bit and just be a person, you know.
Yeah, and that goes to a whole other conversation we could have that we don't have time for now. Uh, the identity versus the strategy. So I coach on both the strategy of the person run in the role versus the identity of the human, and we lose touch with that. So I want to say, as a summary to this, the reason I think you can do this all so well, and everyone has different versions of this, is because you adapt and you are not a worrier. And that looks different for everyone, but I think that can be said to be part of your strength pool. So I want to end this part of the dialogue, and before we jump into part two, and part two is much shorter, what's that one lesson? Can you give me a soundbite or a lesson that people can walk away with from this part of the conversation?
I think to me it is find this is what I was alluding to just a minute ago. Find what works for you, and what works for you is not necessarily what works for me, and vice versa. You started by saying you have trouble saying no, or actually, what you said is I say yes, which is true, but that means that I have trouble saying no.
Oh,
Uh, as I've gotten older, though, I have been more deliberate about saying no to things when I don't think that I have the ability to give uh, as much to a particular project or initiative or organization or even client. Frankly, at this point, I'm basically saying to in certain instances, well, yes, I'd be glad to help you, but let me introduce you to my partner so and so. And it is I think it's so overutilized, but it's about finding the right balance of things that work for you. For me, it's a very busy practice combined with a very busy uh, set of things that I volunteer for. But I also find time to read. I love to read. I read books all the time, and I make sure that I have time in my week to sit and read books, and that relaxes me and it makes me a happier person. So, what works for me is not going to work for everyone, but you have to find what works for you.
and I think to that point, very well said. It's about just sitting still for a minute and thinking about what you need and what could work for you, and trying different things out, right? Instead of just ejecting at 212 degrees when you just can't take it anymore. That actually lends itself to a deliberate, intentional life and a deliberate, intentional practice where everybody around you is like, okay, well, we know what to expect. So yeah, and to your point about saying yes to everything, actually, no, I know you to be a person with good boundaries. I've seen you say no. I just think you say yes to the right opportunities and you're open to life. And I think that is a very attractive brand for people. And maybe to your point, people get there at different times in their life. I know as I'm going to be 54 soon. I am very clear now, much more clear than I was a decade, 2 decades ago, on what those lines look like and what makes me happy. And it's a process, like you said. So here's part two, Gene. You're not perfect, I'm not perfect. So what's a challenge that's on your plate these days?
Well, for me, it's a challenge of what I'm going to do with my practice if I'm so fortunate as to be president of the American Bar Association. So the timing is such that I'm currently a candidate. If I'm successful, I would become president-elect in August of 2027 and president in August of 2028. And effectively, when you're ABA president, and this sort of ramps up during the president-elect year, you really don't have time to practice law while you're also doing the, if you're going to be a good president, you really need to put down your law practice for that period of time. There was an ABA president 25 or so years ago, Martha Barnett from Florida, who was a protege of Chesterfield Smith, who was a legendary ABA president. He was president during Watergate and famously, as ABA president, called for President Nixon to resign. And Martha, she said at the outset, I remember her saying this, that she was trying to keep a practice or thinking about keeping a practice going. And she said that Chesterfield Smith said to her, now listen, you can either be a really good ABA president or a really good lawyer, or you can be a lousy both, one of both, if you try to do both. And so for me, the challenge is I want to be, I hope I am, a really good ABA president. I hope I am also a good lawyer, but I'm not going to be able to do both at the same time. So I've got to figure out the answers for what do I do with my clients, they're the firm's clients that I service.
You
I want
service.
to be clear about that. But what am I going to do in terms of handing up? Because I'm carrying a full caseload right now. And we're talking about basically needing to give or to hand off or somehow place a full caseload in about 18 months or less. And so that's the challenge that I'm working on right now. And it's something that I'm going to have to do very cooperatively with my firm, very cooperatively with other lawyers here at the firm who are also busy. And it's not like they can just completely adopt somebody else's practice. So that's what we're going to be trying to work through.
Okay, I hear you. So, in this part, folks, the people who listen to my podcast know, we really dig in and I pose some questions for you to think about. You know, my job is whatever you want to call me, coach, is those insight moments for you. So, what's really underneath that? When you think about that process, what's the first thing that bothers you the most about it? Or that like you're like, oh, it feels really heavy.
So I want the people that I have worked with and for many years to be comfortable with establishing new relationships here at the firm. Because I think if I have a client, I have a couple of three clients I can think of right now that I have literally been working on their matters since the late 1990s.
Wow.
They've been here a long time and they've been with me a long time.
Hmm.
And I want them to stay here. And I want them to be happy about staying here and to work with people that they like. And I want to get them to the people here that I like and respect and know are outstanding lawyers.
Hmm.
So, but it's a period of transition. So it's going to be uncomfortable for them, uncomfortable for me, and uncomfortable for the lawyer here that is going to take on that work. So that's what I would
Yeah, so if I,
say.
yeah, if I can re-summarize it and slow it down a little bit, the discomfort that comes with the unknown is what is really top of mind for you.
Mhm. Right.
And here's a little bit on that. As I tell all my clients, if I'm not here making you uncomfortable, then there's no point to this relationship because discomfort is how we grow and evolve and how we transition life and we transform really in our careers. And the problem is, though, all lawyers, as we just talked about in the first segment, are running away from discomfort because already they're putting themselves in this discomfort of the practice of law is not fun. So why would I add more to it? Well, here's the news flash. When you choose discomfort and say, hey, fear of the unknown, uncertainty, and I'm choosing discomfort, but I'm going somewhere with this, that makes it like I got the reins on discomfort now. So I see where you're going with this, and so I would say to you, do what you've done with everything else. It's a step by step. Baby steps do not equal not taking action or being childish about it, right? Baby steps lead up to the end. And I think like everything else you've done, it becomes, well, digging under that uncertainty and the discomfort and going, what really feels really uncomfortable about this? What if they land in a place that they are not happy and then they blame me? Well, that's what I would think you would think, right? Because you're choosing a different path that year of being ABA president, which by the way is a very noble path. And I know you're probably saying, oh, people think I'm doing it for the hype or to be the title, whatever. People will say what they say. Deep down though, it's I choose that and I know it, I'm doing it for the right reasons. And it becomes then like everything else I say, which when I talk about attrition, it's a relationship breakdown. People are leaving at those levels because the relationships are so broken, they can't fix it. And broken relationships in law firms are all about communication, miscommunication. So you are an excellent communicator. Sitting in that uncertainty, I think, becomes really doable for you, the discomfort of it, because you are good at setting up the communication plan from now. I would start now, assuming, and you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't assume. What's the harm in assuming that you're going to be able to be president that year, right? And then plan out those communication points based on the relationships. And that, if I was working with you, I'd say, sit down and look at those clients really deeply. What are their strengths? What do they love about you? Where do you guys have such commonality as people, right? I always say to people, people can pay anything for a good lawyer, and a lot of people are good lawyers, but we're paying for those people that we really enjoy being with, or we can tolerate better than other lawyers. Because if I'm going to pay $1,000 an hour to a lawyer, I might as well pay it to someone that I have something in common with. Good bourbon, of course, but anything else, right? So it's the rapport that we started this conversation on. And so I would work my way backwards with what are those relationships? What are those traits of those people? Who do I know in the firm that could be matched that way? And then spend time in both camps feeling it out and then build the communication into it. And I don't see how any of that could ever fail you.
Well, and I think your advice is outstanding as always, and we are starting to have those conversations, and the feedback so far from the clients has been good. It's been, well, we understand, and now we want you to, keep us in our comfort zone. So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, clients, to what you're doing is everyone wants to be seen and heard. And if you start early enough, then the transition is so painless because it's, I see you, I hear you, I want you in good hands. And then you can feel good. And I think, I don't know about you, but what I've heard from other lawyers going through this is when we dig really deep, and this may not be you, but I'll just put this out there, is a little bit of, oh, but I want to be the one they come to, or I'm used to that relationship. And I'm like, well, you can't have both. So I get it. It's kind of like having your child go off to college. It's like, oh, I know you need to go, but I also want you to stay, but I also don't want you to stay, right? It's a little bit of that push-pull duality that's called life. So if that comes up for you, I would say give yourself some grace around that because that's just normal too, right? We want to keep it, but we know we want to move on and we're making a choice. And we're humans. It's complex. Nothing's easy.
Absolutely, that's right. I love the phrase "give some grace." I think that's right on point.
It is. And we'll end on that. Where can people find you if they're looking to connect with you, Gene? How would you like them to get in touch with you? On LinkedIn, on your on the firm website, email? How does it, what works for you? We'll put it in the show notes.
All of those are fine. Certainly on LinkedIn, on the firm website, which is skofirm.com, and my email address. You can get to me through email on the firm website, or you can just, as I said, communicate with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to network.
Beautiful. Fabulous. Any last words?
No, except to say this has been fun. I can't believe the time is up already. It's always great talking with you, and This has been a really enjoyable conversation, Connie.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making time. I know you're busy. We all now definitely know how busy you are. So thanks for taking time and saying yes and showing up. And we appreciate you. And for those of you listening, take whatever works for you. As always, apply it. Come back with questions, comments. Gene has made himself available to you. And that really is a genuine offer. Don't think it's not. And go out there and make the world a better place, whatever that means for you. Until next time, Kathy G out.